that implement several of the provisions that were approved by the City Council as recommended by the Neighborhood Council Review Commission. The ordinance is pretty simple. It basically amends Section 22.805, which provided how Board of Neighborhood Commissioner members were appointed. And it basically added just two categories for characteristics that should be considered when the mayor makes the appointments, and that was homeowner and renter status. So we just added those two words basically to the existing ordinance. The plan amendments add several provisions to the plan that relate to, one, the ability of neighbor councils to join together to form regional and citywide alliances. It again adds this category of homeowner and renter status to the characteristics that neighborhood councils should consider when they're trying to be inclusive and to achieve diversity. It also provides amendments to the neighborhood council's bylaws that when they change their board structure, their basic board structure, those now would have to be approved by the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners rather than by merely the department, which is the current process. And basically we did some minor little typo changes. So we attached a copy of the plan so that you could actually see what those amendments were. But this is a fairly simple plan amendment and ordinance change.
Okay, these were all items that we reviewed here once before.
Correct.
They went to council, were approved by council, and now they're back simply for the approval of the ordinance.
Correct. They basically implement NCR recommendations 32, 34, 35, 41, 43, and 65 in the
This is all that
report.
stuff that was going to take a long time.
Well,
No,
yeah.
it was done very quickly.
Right, exactly. So there actually aren't very many city attorney ordinances that are.
Okay. I don't have any problems with the recommendations of the ordinances. They've been moved by Mr. Stein. Do we have any cards?
Not for this item.
Okay, no cards on this item. So, Ms. Hahn, is it unanimous?
Yes.
It's absolutely unanimous, and we can move on to item. That matter will be referred to council. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a motion, Han Alarcon and the city attorney to report relative to recommendations on the feasibility and the necessary steps to change the selection of a Los Angeles Unified School District superintendent from an appointed position to an elected office.
I don't know the answer to that.
Depends on what you say.
I know, really.
I'm just going to tell it like it is.
We all say that.
That's funny, Richie.
Good morning, Valerie Flores, Assistant City Attorney. Very interesting question posed by the motion. Currently, the proposal to, by a city charter amendment, change the way the superintendent is appointed to an elected position is preempted by state law. The state legislature has plenary control over most education matters except as provided in the state constitution. And currently the state constitution in Article 9, Section 16 grants local jurisdictions, charter cities, the authority to take certain control over the board seats on the Board of Education,
Right.
Including setting the manner that the board members are elected, their compensation,
Term limits.
their qualifications, right, including term limits. And our charter has been very active with regard to those matters, recently setting
Right.
term limits, recently adjusting the salary for board members.
Right.
But outside of those, that limited
That's
role,
interesting.
a local charter city doesn't have authority. The legislature retains all other authority, the state legislature. Now, there is a state educational code provision. It's 35026, which currently provides that the Board of Education members elect or appoint the superintendent and also can remove the superintendent. And so there is a possibility of the legislature changing the method that the superintendent is selected, but it would work a drastic a change in the governance of the LAUSD. Currently,
Exactly.
right, currently the LA, and that might be what you're aiming for, but currently, as you know, the board members are elected by district, and that is in part to ensure that residents
And
have
that's
a voice.
that comes from our charter too, right?
Yes, it does. But I think that when the change was made from an at-large election system to a district-wide election system, that was done in part to accommodate the Voting Rights Act. And so if you would concentrate a lot of power, as it is currently in a superintendent, and had that position elected at large, there might be some Voting Rights Act issues that arise with that the legislature would need to consider.
Unless the superintendent were one of the members.
Right. It
Oh,
could
that's
be
an interesting
structured
idea.
as is the case with some model city governments where all of the members are elected through districts and then they elect a president or superintendent
Oh,
or a
that's
city
a-
manager
that's an
from their
interesting
ranks.
idea.
Yeah, well, it's just an idea, and there's a lot of interesting ideas, but knowing what the ramifications would be. The bottom line is that the state has given the authority to select the superintendent to the school board.
Yes.
Therefore, we couldn't, the city couldn't even sponsor a.
We could,
a-
legislation.
No, we would have to sponsor legislation, but we couldn't sponsor
A ballot measure. No.
Right.
without getting support from the legislature.
Correct.
I mean, we could sponsor a state ballot measure, but we couldn't sponsor a local ballot measure.
Correct.
It wouldn't be a charter change.
You couldn't accomplish a change through the charter
Right.
by changing the charter.
Right.
Right.
That's
It would have to be done at the state level,
Right.
either through a ballot measure
Right.
or with the assistance of the legislature.
Right.
Since the school board selects the superintendent, has there been any conversation with any school board members if they would support this type
Well,
of move?
but they don't like it because
They don't like it because
essentially
it shares
takes their
power. Yeah.
It takes their power away.
Exactly.
Their power to hold the superintendent accountable is that they hire and fire.
Right.
Take that away, it essentially makes them null and void.
Right. It's interesting. So our city charter, I mean, basically the LAUSD was created in our city charter. I mean, that's kind of what we learned
Well,
during the
right.
charter reform
The districts,
process.
right, the districts are created in our charter.
Right. The
and-
school district kind of, most of the do's and don'ts about the school district, or where the board members, the election of the board members.
Correct.
Is in our charter.
Correct.
It's interesting that this one piece is not within our jurisdiction. You'd think, it's interesting that the state retains that power
Yeah, they
over how
retain the power over
how the
what
superintendent-
duties the board has.
what
and
duties the board has. I see.
and the authority of the board. And currently, the board's
I see.
main authority is their role in selecting
Right.
and being able to remove the superintendent.
Right.
And they also are permitted under state law to delegate. The board basically retains all duties to govern LAUSD, but they are allowed by state law to delegate those duties to a superintendent that they appoint and remove.
Right.
I don't think it's unusual at all. As a teacher, I'm well aware that the rules are state-driven. Whether you're talking about your credentialing or whether you're
Yeah.
talking about the curriculum, there are minimums and maximums that are established by the state. So it's not unusual. I seconded the motion for the purposes of stimulating discussion. Not that I support it per se, but that obviously we have to make dramatic changes to find improvement at LAUSD, and whatever dramatic changes we've made, we're not moving as fast as we would like to, and I think everybody concurs in that. But so it offers an alternative suggestion, and you know, I put a little spin on it just a little minute ago, but one would be to have the superintendent be electable through being a member of the board. And although it does, I don't know how what ramifications that would have, but
Can I say something?
but I think that the public education system is always going to be a challenge to balance the pragmatic issues with the political issues. And that's why we have a school board that elects a superintendent. Theoretically, you're getting the best of both worlds, but there may be a better way to get to accomplish the best of both worlds. So I commend Ms. Hahn for introducing the motion, again, just to stimulate the discussion. I don't think we're doing enough as a city, notwithstanding the mayor's
Right.
bold efforts. We just have to do as much as we can.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you again seconding this for the point of discussion. And I know there's a lot of people who have opinion about this. I think for me, it was sort of watching what happened recently with Admiral Brewer. I mean, the quote attempted ousting of this superintendent who was hired by the last school board, and we had visions of school board members and assistants running through Union Station, trying to grab school board members to make sure that they could get behind closed doors and do it in an honorable way. I decided, there's something wrong with this, and I thought, and especially through the charter process, there was an attempt to make the city attorney appointed by the mayor during that session. And the outrage that came from people, and there was the polling that was done said that if people had the choice, they would always go for an elected position over an appointed position because it makes them feel, it does give them, the accountability. And I thought, what if the superintendent of LAUSD was actually elected by the people in the district, the people being the parents, the students. I was envisioning 18-year-old high school students actually getting an opportunity to cast a vote for their superintendent. I thought, what a great moment for teachers, for community people who have issues with the school district. I just felt like it would really make that superintendent accountable to the people of the district and not just to a part-time school board. I mean, we have a part-time school board. And I just felt like watching the political agenda, whether it's a mayor of Los Angeles or whoever, it seems to be at whim. What's going on in the political arena that somehow gets a superintendent either hired or fired. And I thought we have a superintendent who's elected at the state level. We have a state superintendent of public education. So I thought it'd be interesting to discuss what this would look like. And I'm glad to hear this. I actually thought maybe we had the ability in our own city charter to put it before the vote of the people, and now you're telling me we don't. It's a state issue. So I always think it's good to discuss it. I've heard back from some of the education community. I wrote letters to as many people as I could think of to say, what do you think? What's your idea about this? We've heard back from some. We haven't heard back from any, so after this, I would like to see it go to rules and maybe come back here and get more input to see if there was any kind of will to sponsor some legislation at the state level. But clearly, what's going on now doesn't work.
On the state superintendent, there was an effort to eliminate the state superintendent in trade for the Secretary of Education. There's always going to be a battle between one political force, the governor's office, and the superintendent of schools. But it was clear that the voters wanted an independent superintendent, and that's what happened. But that's why we still have a superintendent, and that's just within the last 5 years. So, but for me, the issue should lie not just on change for the sake of change, but on the substantive benefits that are derived from it. And in this case, it's like I'm not sure we're doing anything more than playing musical chairs without identifying what the substantive benefit is. And then we offer these musical chair actions to the public as as a measure of our success, when in fact the graduation rates continue to be challenged. And so,
Right.
so I appreciate the discussion. We have seen major activity. Obviously, the mayor has engaged in a very forthright way, and we have a new superintendent. And we don't know. Maybe in a year, we would be much more compelled to explore this. But right now, I think we ought to see what happens in the next several months with the current.
Right.
One of the
I think you just look at status quo, and what status quo right now is not good. And I had to laugh. One person called me up and
Right
said,
now, what I'm saying is there is no
yeah,
status quo.
yeah. One person called me up and said, "Oh, you're going to have an elected superintendent. That means you could the possibility of electing somebody that has absolutely no background in education." And I'm like the last two that were appointed. Romer had no background in education, and neither did Admiral Brewer. So
Here's one of the problems.
I don't know
that
about saying Governor Romer didn't have any experience in
well, he ran a state.
he didn't have education.
But he built a ton of schools.
Absolutely.
You got to give him credit for
Yeah,
passing
absolutely.
bond measures and building schools.
Yeah.
But the way I look at this is, if you remember the Los Angeles Police Department, where they had a chief of police that was independent from elected officials, and that chief of police didn't have a term limit. That chief of police could remain and was accountable to the people. Well, the voters passed measure, I think it was Measure F, to say the chief of police has a 5-year term with a 5-year renewal appointed by the mayor. If the school district, if the superintendent was elected by the public and the superintendent didn't get along with the Board of Education, you could have the same situation that we had with the chief of police didn't get along with the mayor and the city council members. So there's a trade-off. You're going to have the school district run by an elected superintendent who clashes with the school board. Right now, I heard on the radio this morning that the superintendent's talking about massive layoffs of teachers. I'm sure that's going to create havoc in the school district. And what if the school board doesn't want that, but the superintendent says we need to do that to save money?
It's called checks and balances.
Yeah, but I think if you're elected, and as the former chief of police, 2 chiefs, 3 chiefs ago, they did what they wanted to do.
They weren't elected, though.
No, they weren't elected. They were appointed, and they were appointed indefinitely with no term. They didn't have to leave. They could battle as long as they wanted. When the school board superintendent is elected, you could have that same scenario. And that's the concern I have, is someone's got to be accountable and responsible to someone. Currently, the superintendent's responsible to the school board that are elected by the people. So I think you got to balance it in a way, which way it works. Which way does it work better?
It's not working now.
Well, I agree it doesn't work now, but is it the system that's designed, or is it the leadership that's not working? You could get a school board member.
Good question.
Or is it the
who's-
fact that we have one of the lowest per capita spending rates in the entire nation?
And that could be a factor. And if you're going to lay off
I
2,000
guarantee you
teachers,
it's a factor, but
you're going to have
whether or not it's the key factor.
40 kindergartens, 40
We're
students in the
40
kindergarten class.
We're
That's going to work.
49th in the nation in how much we spend for each individual student. We're not going to get
There-
performance.
There's a lot of factors. I don't know if
Right.
I don't know if
We
the
get what
elected
we pay
process
for.
is the
I'm
answer.
never afraid of the elected process. I'm never afraid of people electing someone to have a powerful job. I'm never afraid of that.
Well, you had an elected insurance commissioner, Quackenbush. Look what happened to that. So elected process doesn't always work.
Well, he's
I don't
not
think you
there.
have to go that far, but that's a
Not
whole
there
different
now,
issue.
is
Well, I'm trying to highlight some
Anyway,
illustrated
actually,
cases.
very good job.
So now it's
we
going to come to
have-
rules?
Yeah.
Right now, we're going to take public comment on this matter. We have Lydia Grant.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, just have a seat.
Hi, I'm Lydia Grant. I am the education representative on the Sunland Tonga Neighborhood Council. I'm also an LAUSD volunteer, which is why I'm here today. I've been a volunteer for over 10 years, and I do have a presidential award for the volunteer work at LAUSD. As a
Do you have
neighbor,
any children? Do you have any children?
yes, I do. I have 2 in high school.
Never mind.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason I'm here today is to discuss this because I think that there's a very important issue here, and that is the negativity that will to the communities that it will look like from City Council. And the reason I say that is because the job of the elected officials of the school board is to, A, choose a superintendent, and B, work on the legislation and planning to help support that superintendent in running the district. By telling the people of the city of Los Angeles that you've now chosen board members that we feel are incompetent, that you're not good at choosing who those people are to make this decision. Now we want you to pick somebody else. It's sending a very strange, mixed message. It's telling people you don't trust their judgment, but now you trust them to do something different over here. It's kind of like, to use a phrase, talking out both sides of your mouth. It doesn't make sense, and I think that there would be a very negative connotation to people involved in the city council. It would just seem to the communities as another, quote, try to take over the district. I think that there's major improvements that can be made. I think the dysfunction is very high, but I do often work with them, and I do believe the key is accountability to the people. I really do, and I think that that's what the missing link is. And I do think that the neighborhood councils do have a way in helping support their community schools in a way that the district becomes accountable to the people. I think that there are definitely things that could be worked out. I know I've been working on some things, but I think that that is the key. I think the city has a lot of power in helping change us, but I think by empowering the communities is a more positive approach to it with less negativity to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Wiseman?
I'm going to speak as an individual, so whatever you think you know about my background, you can keep for yourself. This is an issue that really points to what our appointed and elected officials are really all about. They're about three things. They're about ability and knowledge of the subject matter that they engage in. In the case of the school superintendent, we would hope that that superintendent will be an educator, will have a background in education. They are about being a good administrator because he's got a $14 billion budget to administrate, so it's huge, and he has had to, or she would have had to have had some background. And thirdly, then it's political. Now, you're emphasizing the political this morning, I believe. And if you were going to elect a superintendent, I would suggest that we elect it every year and re-elect them every year, and that many of our city officials also submit themselves for reapproval by the electorate more frequently than they do. And I scan the members of this committee very carefully when I say that. The accountability factor in our city government, in our relationship to our schools, in our relationship to our neighborhood councils, who are, I hope, one of your prime source of reverberation, of hearing what the community really is thinking, needs a lot of upgrading, and this may be a way to do it. But I think that the reason I rise to speak to you about it is the concern I have for this as it affects and it involves every official in our city. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We're just gonna.
Can we just have it go to rules and then have it come back
I'm not
here?
interested in sending it to rules.
No? Okay.
If you want to hold it,
Okay.
we can do that, and
So rules doesn't even have to deal with this?
they don't have to. What do you mean?
I mean,
If-
I thought if it was
If you want to move on it,
If we wanted to move it forward, they have requested to take it over. there.
Oh, I see. So you're not interested in moving it forward?
I'm not interested in sending it over. No,
Okay.
because it would give the impression that we support the idea, and I don't want to do
Well, I just feel like I haven't heard back enough from the educational arena out there. I mean, we're just, it's,
If we were
they
going
had
to
the
make a
holidays.
recommendation that we pursue state action to change the law, then I would send it, I would want to send it to rules. But if we don't know that we want to do that, I don't want to send it to rules. That's the only reason to send it to rules.
Right.
Is if
Right.
we want them to craft some kind of legislation.
then
Right.
maybe we should hold it here and have more debate and more discussion. And I would support that, to get more stakeholders, PTA, et cetera, school board members if they're interested, instead of killing it, to have it debated.
Oh, I'm not, we don't have to kill it. We just keep it in committee.
Okay, that's fine.
not a problem.
Okay.
That's fine.
We keep
Thank
it in
you,
committee
Mr.
for a
Zine.
while. That's fine. Okay, item number, we're done.
That's it.
Public comment, Mr. Wiseman.
Okay, doctor, I'll sit down then. I need to stretch.
Because this public comment has to do with the way we've been handling the neighborhood council file issue, which is about to come up in city council. I would hope that one or more of you would rise to allow the neighborhood council people who are going to be there to testify at this time as they've testified before. Yes, it has gone through committee. Yes, the testimony has been heard in committee. But out of courtesy and out of respect for what the neighborhood councils are about and their deep concern for this particular issue, I think the people who are going to be there today should be allowed to comment. That's just my suggestion to one or all three of you, and if you would do that for us, I think we'd be very pleased.
Should we make that a joint motion?
We can't make it a motion, this is public
No, in
comment.
council.
But in council, I would have no problem doing that, particularly since the report from Bunk emerged after we had the opportunity to have a public hearing. So they have not had the opportunity to publicly comment on the Bunk report. So,
That'd be appropriate.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Now, can I stand up?
Great. Oh, yeah. This meeting is adjourned. I could just leave, huh? You wait here for how long?
I'll stay,
10 o'clock,
Yeah,
is it?
April Fool's Day.
There you go. John, I need to slide in there.